Chapter 5, Lesson 1, The Rise of the Greek Civilization. How does geography influence the way people live? Henrik Schlieman's love of Greek antiquity began at a young age. He was convinced that there was some truth to the epics of the Greek poet Homer. Henrik was determined to find the truth. His excavations in Greece and discussions with other archaeologists led him to make a bold claim. The body of the legendary Agamemnon, king of Mycenae, was not buried where the scholars had previously thought. In 1876, while digging in Mycenae, Henrik shared with the king of Greece an important discovery. With great joy, I announce to your majesty that I have discovered the tombs which tradition proclaimed by the Phaeacians indicated to be graves of Agamemnon, Cassandra, Eurymedon, and their companions, all slain at the banquet by Cleopatra. There it is. This is where he found their bodies and stuff. And he knows that because he found a crazy gold mask. It's wild. I'll show you in a second. So we're going to do this later. But mountains and seas, how did the physical geography influence the lives of the early Greeks? So I'm going to put my little cursor on the side here of the sentence I'm reading so you can follow along. Greece was the first civilization to develop in Europe and the westernmost part of Asia. In other early civilizations, people first settled in river valleys, right? The Euphrates River that had the rich soil. Greek civilization began in an area dominated by mountains and seas. If you flew over this region today, you would see rugged landscapes and beautiful seas. The Greek mainland is on the southern part of Europe's Balkan Peninsula. A peninsula is a body of water with a body of land. A peninsula is a body of land with water on three sides. Far to the east of the Greek mainland is another peninsula called Anatolia. It is part of present-day Turkey. I'm going to scroll down. Next paragraph. Between these two lands are the dazzling blue waters of the Aegean Sea. The Aegean Sea is part of the larger Mediterranean Sea. There are hundreds of islands in the Aegean Sea. They look like stepping stones between the Greek mainland and Anatolia. The Greeks traded goods and ideas between islands and along the area's coastlines. Today, many Greeks fish and trade for a living, much as the ancient Greeks did before them. Other ancient Greeks settled in farming communities. These settlements began on narrow, fertile plains that ran along the coastline between the mountains. In the area's mild climate, farmers grew crops such as wheat, barley, olives, and grapes. They also raised sheep and goats. Scrolling down, next paragraph. Even though some Greek communities were near the sea, others were far from the coast. Inland communities were separated from each other by rugged mountains and deep valleys. As a result, communities in many parts of ancient Greece became fiercely independent. They came to think of their communities almost as separate countries. So here's our amazing area. Here's the mainland, and then here's all our hundreds of islands. Let's scroll down to an island civilization. How did the civilization of the Minoans develop? Let's see. Greek myths describe an early civilization that developed on Crete, an island southeast of the Greek mainland. It's right here. So, Crete. About 1900 CE, a British archaeologist named Arthur Evans discovered a site on Crete called Knossos. See, it's Knossos, not Gnosis, Knossos. There he unearthed an amazing palace of a legendary king named Minos. King Minos. I think there's a whole myth about he touches things, they turn to gold. Evans concluded that the Minoans and his family lived in the palace. The palace had numerous rooms that were connected by twisting passageways. Some of these rooms were used to store oil, wine, and grain. Other rooms were workshops where people made jewelry, vases, and statues. There was even bathrooms in the palace. So this is the palace. Ta-da! An ancient people called the Minoans built the palace on Knossos. The Minoan civilization was the first to develop in the Aegean region, but they were not Greeks. Their civilization lasted about 2500 BCE to 1450 BCE. Trade was an important economic activity for the Minoans. They built ships using the wood from Crete's forests of oak and cedar trees. The Minoans sailed to Egypt and Syria. There, they traded pottery and stone vases for ivory and metals. The Minoan ships were also patrolled the eastern Mediterranean Sea to protect the Minoan trade from pirates. Arr! All right, next paragraph. I'm gonna see if I can make this bigger. Nope, that did not work. Full screen? Is that better? Okay. Okay, sometime around 1450 BCE, however, the Minoan civilization collapsed. Historians don't know why this happened. One theory for this collapse is that the undersea earthquakes caused huge waves that destroyed the Minoan cities. Other historians think that people from the Greek mainland known as Mycenaeans invaded Crete. Here's Knossos. Here's the city. They know what this looks like because of like the foundation that they dug up. Now, mainland civilization. How did the Mycenaeans gain power in the Mediterranean? About 2000 BCE, the Mycenaeans left their homeland in Central Asia. They moved into mainland Greece. There, they gradually mixed with the local people and set up several kingdoms. The Mycenaean Kingdom. Little was known about the Mycenaeans until the late 1800s CE. That was when a German archaeologist named Heinrich Schliemann discovered the ruins of a palace in Mycenae. Mycenae. They named the people of the civilization the Mycenaeans. Each Mycenaean king lived in a palace built on a hill. Thick walls circled the palace and protected the kingdom's people. Nobles lived outside the walls on large farms called estates. The workers and enslaved people who farmed the land lived in the villages on these estates. Mycenaean palaces were the centers of government. Artisans there made leather goods, clothes, and jars for wine and olive oil. Other workers made swords and oxhide shields, because shields are not, they're made of leather and wood with a little bit of metal. They're not mostly metal. Government officials recorded the wealth of the kingdom's residents. They also collected wheat, livestock, and honey as taxes because they didn't have like paper money or even coins. So these are some of the amazing gold artifacts they found. Feel free to look through this. There's like a bunch of stuff. So like feel free. Yes. So swords, weapons, the artifacts that they found. So traders and warriors. Minoan traders from Crete visited the Greek mainland. Gradually, the Mycenaeans adopted features of Minoan culture. They built ships and worked with bronze. They learned how the Minoans used the sun and stars to navigate the seas. The Mycenaeans also began to worship the Earth Mother, the Minoans' chief god. They're polytheistic, but that's the chief god. By the mid-1400s BCE, the Mycenaeans had conquered the Minoans and controlled the Aegean Sea. This brought new wealth to the Mycenaeans, which they used to expand their military strength. The Mycenaeans were proud of their military success in the Trojan War. So the Trojan War, that's where there's the wooden horse and there's people like hiding inside and they, jump out after they let them in. So that wasn't Greeks. It was the Mycenaeans who were conquering the Minoans. The Dark Age. However, the Mycenaean civilization declined over time. So even that one declined over time. The Mycenaean kingdoms fought one another and earthquakes destroyed their palace fortresses. By 1100 BCE, the Mycenaean civilization had crumbled. About this time, groups of warring peoples moved from place to place throughout the eastern Mediterranean region. One of these groups was a Greek-speaking people known as the Dorians. Yeah, I'm saying that right. Dorians. They invaded the Greek mainland from the north and took control of most of the region. Historians call the next 300 years of Greek history the Dark Age. During this difficult time, trade slowed down, people made fewer things to sell, and most were very poor farmers. Farmers grew only enough food to feed their families. Many people also stopped writing and keeping records. In Greece, several positive developments also happened during this time. Dorian warriors introduced iron weapons and the skill of iron making. Iron weapons and farm tools were stronger and cheaper than the bronze ones used by the Mycenaeans. As the Dorians pushed into Greece, thousands of people fled the Greek mainland. They settled on the Aegean Islands and the western shore of Anatolia. Okay, so now we got Greek-speaking people. Hellenes. By 750 BCE, many descendants of the people ran away and returned so let me start over. By 750 BCE, many descendants of the people who had run away, they returned to the Greek mainland. They brought back new ideas, crafts, and skills. Small independent communities developed under local leaders who became kings. These people called themselves Hellenes, or Greeks. And so like Hellenistic culture. Farmers in these communities grew more food than their families could use. That's called a surplus. The Greeks traded their surplus food with each other and with neighboring peoples. See, surplus food, like more than you can have. Because you can't like trade food that you need to eat so you don't die. So you need the surplus. Surplus. We're going to highlight that word. Highlight. Well, I highlighted part of it. That's not it. Come on. Come on, Mrs. Kirby. There we go. Highlight. Blue. Okay, whatever. I can't even. Okay, well, they're surplus. No, I'm no quitter. Let's do this. Highlight the word surplus. Highlight surplus. I do not. Oh, I think I know what I'm doing wrong. Surplus. This will be on the test. I'm just going to make it on the test at this point because I don't know. Okay, I give up. Surplus. Hopefully you can figure this out. As trade increased, a new need for writing developed. The Greeks adopted an alphabet from the Phoenician traders who sailed from the Mediterranean coast. Phoenicians, they are the ones that gave us our alphabet, like the phonetic saying of sounds. It's pretty cool. Okay, so next paragraph. The Greek alphabet had 24 letters that represented different sounds. It greatly simplified reading and writing in the Greek language. Record keeping became easier, and soon people wrote down the tales that had been told by bards or storytellers. Previously, these tales had been passed down from generation to generation orally. Now, they could finally be kept in writing form. So if we see, here's our Greek alphabet, alpha, beta, gamma. And did you know sigma is a Greek letter? Yep, sigma. That's so sigma. Next section, colonies and trade. How did the early Greeks spread their culture? As Greece recovered from the Dark Age, its population increased rapidly. By 700 BCE, local farmers could not produce enough grain to feed the growing population. To solve this problem, Greek communities began to send people outside the Aegean area to establish colonies. A colony is a settlement in a new territory that has close ties to its homeland. The Greek founded many colonies along the coasts of the Mediterranean Sea and the Black Sea between 750 BCE and 550 BCE. Greek culture spread into new areas such as southern Italy, Sicily, France, Spain, North Africa, and Western Asia. The colonies traded with their parent cities on the Greek mainland. They shipped grains, metals, fish, timber, enslaved people to Greece. That's going to go on your like economy section of grapes, by the way. So like side note, grapes paper, grains, metal, fish, timber, enslaved people. So in return, the Greek mainland sent wine, olive oil, pottery into the colonies. Also add that to your grapes paper. As the Greeks began to make coins for metal, this affected their trade. Trade expanded as merchants traded money for goods rather than bartered for goods. So I don't have to spend like, here's 2 gallons of honey and you can give me a goat. Like they don't have to do that anymore. They can use coins. This system increased a colony's wealth. As the demand for goods grew, artisans made more goods to meet the demand. And when you see the word goods, it's like stuff. Let's see if it will work. Will it work? Oh, it worked this time. Yay, good. Okay. Yay. So goods is like stuff, like the vases and the shields and the metalwork and olive oil. People in different colonies specialized in making certain products. For example, in colonies where farmers raised sheep, people began to make cloth from the sheep's wool. So here we see the purple is like mainland Greece, and then the green is the Greek colonies. So you'd see they went there and traded their stuff back and forth. When comparing Ancient Greek coins with modern American coins, you can see that both sets of coins are two-sided. They show a face on one side and a different image on the other. Also, both sets of coins have decorative borders on both sides. The Greeks began making coins from silver in the 600s BCE. Current American quarters and dimes are made of layers of copper and nickel and covered with a copper nickel alloy or a blend. So in the Greek coins, like this is called a gorgon. These are some gods. This is maybe a god or a ruler. This is the Spartan helmet. Greek city-states. How did the Greek city-states create the idea of citizenship? Mountains and seas separated Greek communities from each other. As a result, people developed a loyalty to the community in which they lived. Communities became fiercely independent. Like if you ask Mrs. Kirby, hey, where are you from? I'd be like, I'm from California. I love being from California. I'm a California girl. So that's like the community. Then like, oh, I'm from the Northern Hemisphere. That's also true, but I don't have an identity with the Northern Hemisphere. So by the end of the Dark Age, nobles who owned large estates had overthrown the Greek kings. Across Greece, nobles ruled numerous city-states. As in Mesopotamia, the Greek city-states were made up of a town or city and surrounded by the surrounding area. Each city-state or polis, I know it looks like police, but it's not, it's polis, was like an independent country. Today, the English words such as police and politics comes from the word polis, the Greek word. Okay. What did a polis look like? The polis was the basic political unit of Greek civilization. At the center of each polis was a fort built on top a hill. It's a hilltop. The hilltop that a fort stood on was called an acropolis. Local people could take refuge in the acropolis when invaders attacked. The Greek built temples on the acropolis to honor local gods. Outside the acropolis was an open area called an agora. Agora. I'm going to go with agora. This space was used as a marketplace. It was also an area where people could gather and debate issues, choose officials, pass laws, and carry out business. City neighborhoods surrounded the agora. Just beyond the cities were villages and farmland that were also part of the polis. Because most city-states were surrounded by mountains and seas, they were usually small. Some were only a few square miles in area. While others covered hundreds of square miles. By 500 BCE, nearly 300,000 people lived in the city-state of Athens. Most city-states, however, were much smaller. So you can see here, like the fortress around it, and inside the fortress is your little temple and other buildings that were important for the running of the government. What did the citizenship mean to the Greeks? We owe many of our ideas about citizenship to I can't talk. We owe many of our ideas about citizenship to the ancient Greeks. Who was a Greek citizen? Citizens were members of a political community with rights and responsibilities. In Greece, male citizens had the right to vote, hold public office, own property, and defend themselves in court. In return, citizens had the responsibility to serve in government and to fight for their polis as a citizen soldier. Ancient Greek citizenship was very different from that of ancient Mesopotamia or ancient Egypt, where most people were subjects. They had no rights, no voice in government, and no choice but to obey their rulers. Right? Like the Pharaoh decided what people did, right? Decided the laws. He wasn't asking like the merchants' opinions. So the Pharaoh would have like viziers and advisors, just like King Babylon would have advisors, but they didn't involve like everyday citizens. So subjects versus citizens. Citizens have power over the decisions being made. Subjects don't. In most Greek city-states, only free land-owning men born in the polis could be citizens. So you had to be free, a man, and be rich, because landowning. They believed the responsibility to run the city-state was theirs because the polis was made up of their property. Some city-states later ended that requirement of owning land for a person to be a citizen. Women and children might qualify as citizen for citizenship, but like they didn't have any rights that went along with it. So they could be a Greek citizen because they were born there and they're dad is Greek, but they couldn't vote, couldn't run for office, and they could not defend themselves in court. So, citizen soldiers. In early Greece, wars were fought by wealthy nobles riding horses and driving chariots. By 700 BCE, citizens called hoplites made up the city-state armies. The hoplites fought on foot, which is not like the wealthy nobles. So we have nobles and citizens. So the wealthy nobles, they got the horse. Hoplites were on foot. Each heavily armed soldier carried a round shield, a short sword, and a spear. During battles, rows of hoplites marched forward together, shoulder to shoulder. They raised their shields above them to protect them from the enemy's arrows. Pew, twing, 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 twing. This unified formation is called a phalanx. Phalanx, yep. I think I'm doing that right. The success of the hoplites came from their pride in fighting as brave warriors. In Athens, for example, soldiers took this oath: I will not disgrace my sacred arms, nor desert my comrade, wherever I am stationed, and I will observe the established laws, and whatever laws in the future may be reasonably established. If any person seek to overturn the laws, I will oppose them. I will honor my religion of my fathers. And so that's their oath that they promise. It's kind of like the American Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. So it's not dissimilar to that. The polis gave Greek citizens a sense of belonging. This is similar to how people feel about their home states today. So, like me, Mrs. Kirby with the California girl. The citizens put the needs of the polis above their own. Such strong loyalty to their own city-state divided the Greeks. They were not as unified as a whole country. This lack of unity weakened Greece, making it easier to conquer. So here you can see the hoplite armor, and we'll go into detail about everything they wore, because we're making some really awesome shields. So the Greek soldiers' round shields were important for survival in battle. This is a modern illustration, which means it is not a primary source. The hoplites were citizen soldiers of ancient Greece city-states, wore up to 70 pounds of armor, carried a 7 to 10 foot spear, short sword, and a round shield. The hoplites were named after these round shields called hoplons. Hoplites and their highly organized phalanx style of battle earned the Mediterranean armies a reputation for being undefeatable, and we are Spartans. So that is lesson 1. Well done. Now you can use this audio to help you answer your questions. Go team.